Hello everybody and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards and it's just me this week. Connor's a busy bee, just studying for the bar, as well as taking time to visit family. So it's just me again this week, which it's going to be a relatively short episode, so not going to be that big a deal. But in terms of the big news in the K-State sphere, you of course had K-State Media Days, or Big 12 Media Days, of which obviously K-State is a part of, and the commitment of Tucker Ashford, as well as a little bit of women's basketball news. But let's just dive straight ahead first into the recruiting news, and that is the July 4th commitment of Tucker Ashford, who's an edge rusher from Fort Worth, Texas. And this is just another one of those big K-State recruiting wins because he's rated by On3 and ESPN, for as much as those count for every single player not named Miles Tedecki. He's rated as a 4-star. On the aggregate in the industry ratings, he's a high 3-star. And this was a legitimate recruiting win for K-State over some peer programs and some Power 4 competition, beating out Houston, Illinois, Wisconsin, Cal, among others. But in terms of the type of player that Tucker Ashford is, I think that the best way that I could possibly describe him is he has probably the best first step out of any K-State player that I've seen recruited, maybe since Chidi Obiizor, but even then, Chidi's first step was a sort of different type of quick, where it was that very explosive, just sort of straight, like it's kind of like a missile. The difference between Chidi Obiizor and Tucker Ashford's first step is Chidi is like a missile, whereas Tucker Ashford is a bit more like a sprinter getting off the blocks. And that makes a lot of sense, given that he did play this sort of weird edge he was an edge rusher at his high school, but they play a very strange defense where it's almost like this sort of dollar defense with 6 defensive backs on the field at any given time, only one defensive lineman with their hand in the dirt. It's an odd defense, but one that, weirdly enough, Tucker Ashford definitely excels in, and that'll get into a later point that I'm going to make about him. But back on the topic of his first step, he has an absurdly quick first step that he uses very, very well when he's pass rushing. Right now, I'd say he's a bit more of a finesse rusher than a power rusher, meaning he's going to be better at getting around guys than going through them. And that's not because there isn't tape of him going through some offensive tackles. There's a couple of clips like that. It's the type of clips where you just kind of have to feel for the other guy who's on the other side, who definitely did not deserve what just happened to them. But he's very much in the mold of a stand-up edge rusher, which begs the question, and a lot of people just sort of pencil him in automatically as a defensive end. And I'm not going to say that I don't understand it. In fact, I would be perfectly fine with him playing defensive end. He already has the weight for it. He carries himself in that 6'3", 240 frame very, very well. But the first thought when I was looking at his film was, wait a minute, he could play Sam linebacker, because he has that elite forward first step, but is still fast enough to play out in space. I don't know, it's just his film and his athletic profile made me think of a Sam linebacker, which is the role Des Purnell plays right now. But no matter where he plays, at defensive end or at Sam linebacker, another one of his really, really good traits is, and it's a very, very niche thing that not a lot of people will notice, but a lot of defensive ends, even pro defensive ends, whenever they're rushing the passer or they're trying to get around an offensive tackle, they have a move where they will, whenever they rip, which is taking your arm and just trying to basically put your shoulder in between the offensive tackle and you so you could get around them, a lot of guys will sort of put their head down and lose sight of where the quarterback is, which will kind of get them run too far one direction. They're not going to get the sack because of it. Tucker Ashford does a very, very good job of keeping his eyes up whenever he uses that rip move. And he shows a lot of moves. He shows the rip move to the outside. He's shown a more than capable bull rush. The only concern that I have with his tape is there are times that, I don't know why, it seems like the other side is just terrified of getting a holding penalty against him, because they will legitimately just let him go. They will just stop blocking him and say, you know what, maybe I'm choosing life today. Which, fair. If my 5'9", at the time 215 ass was going up against a 4-star defensive end commit that I just saw eat someone, which, yes, he basically did do that on one of his reps where he tossed a quarterback aside. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to block him that much either, but the point still stands. Really, really good commit for K-State. And the only other thing to mention on the recruiting front is the decommitment of Brandon Ford, which I was fine with Brandon Ford whenever he committed. I thought that he was a power 4 player. I thought he had the potential to be a good player. Ends up going a different direction. It sounds like it was a mutual thing, and he ends up committing to Oklahoma State. So I will gladly take the trade of Brandon Ford for Tucker Ashford, because I think Ashford legitimately has the ceiling of an all Big 12 player, or at least a significant contributor on numerous K-State defenses. So that's the recruiting news. Now we can talk a little bit about the women's basketball news. It's going to be relatively short. Jeff Mittie, the head basketball coach of K-State, the women's side, got an extension all the way to 2030, which makes perfect sense given that he's coming off of a second weekend run in the NCAA tournament and the recruiting class that he was able to put together this year with the names like Anaya Foy and Jordan Spicer. It's one of those situations where you're going to have people who have made up their mind about Jeff Mittie. And Jeff Mittie and Pete Hughes at this point are kind of the same coach to me, which is funny because both of them love their respective sports. Mittie's a big baseball fan and Pete Hughes is a massive women's basketball fan. But they're kind of the same coach at this point, where their in-game decision-making is sometimes questionable, but you can't deny that they have recruiting ability. Pete Hughes is just in a sport where that's infinitely more important. Talent acquisition is infinitely more important in baseball than the traditional X's and O's as it would be in basketball. But if you're looking for some hot take about Jeff Mittie getting extended to 2030, there isn't one here. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the recruiting classes he's bringing in, and even if we've seen the ceiling of what he can do at K-State being a second weekend team, that's a perfectly fine ceiling, especially when it generates as much excitement as it did for Connor and I this last year. So the last piece of K-State news this week comes down to K-State at Big 12 Media Days, which, I mean, full disclosure, I've never been very good at covering media days. That's always more or less been Connor's thing. But the general takeaways that I had from media days is, one, whoever set up the lighting and whoever set up the camera angle for specifically Chris Kleiman's segment has something against him, because it kind of made Kleiman look like he had a solar panel attached to the front of his face, which is very unfortunate. But in terms of substantive things, is I think my biggest takeaway was talking about the offense and also the interview he did with the two other guys plus Brock Osweiler, because Brock Osweiler was just staring at the side of Kleiman's head for the majority of the interview. These are the things that I notice when I'm looking at media day footage. Connor notices the substantive things. But there's a lot about the offense that I think is worth noting, especially when it's going to be under Matt Wells as opposed to Connor Riley this last year. And I think that most quarterbacks would very much prefer a Matt Wells offense, and you sort of get that vibe based on the conversations with Kleiman and I believe KSO, or it was either KSO or Go Power Cat that posted an interview with Avery where they talk about, obviously favorite memories from last year, but it was the conversation about Matt Wells, I think, is probably the most interesting thing from Big 12 Media Days, plus Kleiman sort of going into the weighing whether or not they were going to play in Ireland and how that took away a home game. But I'm just sort of going to riff on the Matt Wells thing. And listen, I made a video about Matt Wells being hired at K-State whenever he first got the job. This was maybe a week or two after it was announced that Connor Riley would be the full-time offensive coordinator and Matt Wells was just going to be quarterbacks coach, assistant OC. I was hesitant then. I've gotten a lot more comfortable with the idea of Matt Wells running a K-State offense in particular, especially one operated by Avery Johnson, and getting that additional coaching from Matt Wells. I think that Matt Wells has the potential to be the best offensive coordinator hire that K-State has made in the Kleiman era, which granted there are 4 names that you could have to that list, and 2 of them weren't that good. In Courtney Messingham, who was fine, Colin Klein, who's probably going to be the one that has to be unseated depending on how this next year goes, Connor Riley, who was fine, if a little bit predictable at times and a little too reliant on inside zone, and then Matt Wells, who knows, could be over-reliant on the screen game like he was at Texas Tech. But there's also a lot of respect that K-State is getting in the national sphere, and you could tell it was at media days where K-State is sort of treated as, I don't want to say the team to beat, but they are treated as one of the top teams in the conference by pretty much everyone that covers Big 12 sports. And I think that that's fair. Whenever you win, I think it's 8 games in the last 5 years, COVID year doesn't count, and then 9 games in the last 3 or 4. So whenever you're getting to that level of consistency, and this is just stealing a point from Kleiman himself, whenever you're getting to that level of consistency, that, yeah, you deserve that respect that you're getting, even if you have a few of those hiccup games. But it really is just getting closer and closer to football season. Connor and I are going to do the preview episode sometime soon, but that's really it for substantive K-State news. So now I can just riff a little bit about the football game, the CFB 26, EA Sports College Football 26. Overall, I'm really enjoying it. No one came here for game reviews, but I'm really enjoying it. Formation subs are amazing. And the only complaint that I have up to this point is that they sorely need a roster update. And that's not just for K-State, but I'm especially noticing it for K-State. Larry Porter IV, JoJo Scott, Logan Bartley, Darian Whitaker, a bunch of the guys from this freshman class just aren't in the game. Even some weirder omissions, like Will Ancio isn't in the game either. And I think that'll get solved by an upcoming patch or a roster update. But it did sort of dampen the vibe a little bit. And Montario Elston was another one that I was really upset about, that I didn't get some of the really exciting talent from this class. But that's really a non-issue because that'll get patched in soon enough. And Lincoln Cure is in the game. And anyone who tells you that Lincoln Cure is not broken in CFB 26 is lying to you, because legitimately I don't know what it is, because he's rated as, I think he was a 78 he's high 70s. He legitimately plays like a 90 overall right out of the box, and it's amazing. And that's really all I got. It's a relatively short episode by Alleycat standards, but hey, it's not the biggest week for news, plus it's just me. So, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow me on a more personal note, I am at ACEdward00. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.